you're not going to get the bats that you want. So I think it's a pretty fun one.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, what do you say we jump right into it? We've got 12 games. We got ourselves an hour to get through this, and I think we can make it work. Let's kick it off with Philly and Milwaukee. Before we do, quickly take a quick look at any weather concerns here. I think we're pretty good. Is there anything that stands out to you as something to watch?
I haven't seen anything. I didn't look super closely because I don't think there is anything. But yeah, I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, I think we're in good shape. All right. So we've got Philly, we've got Milwaukee, Jared Eichhoff, Brandon Woodruff. We talked about this on a prior show, but I think Brandon Woodruff's actually been pretty unlucky this season, and you're starting to see some positive regression set in. His last 3 games have been very solid. He had the highest BABIP in the league through the first month of the season. On the other side, Jared Eichhoff, strong curveball. He's been a little bit wild at times, but at the same time, he's missing bats, pitching pretty deep into games outside of that one against Washington. An interesting pitching matchup. I can't say I'm super high on either of these guys today, but I certainly have respect for both of them. I also have a lot of respect for the Milwaukee hitters and the lefty power in this lineup. So I think this is a pretty interesting matchup on both sides of it.
Yeah, I think so too. I have a lot of respect for both pitchers. They're both at price points that I don't really love. I think that the Milwaukee lineup is a little bit better for Eichhoff than I expected it to be. There are only 3 lefties in there. He had 4 if you include Woodruff, but I'm not including him. He has been pretty good this season, but it's still a Milwaukee team that I think is really dangerous. Obviously Travis Shaw goes to the injured list, but you get one of the top prospects in baseball replacing him in Keston Hiura. So it's still not like it's an easy out in this lineup. And Eichhoff's price tag has just come up as a result of the way he's been pitching recently. So I don't really want to get there. And then, Woodruff, like you said, he's a pretty good pitcher. He has a high strikeout percentage this year, but it's a good Philadelphia lineup that really drives up pitch counts and makes pitchers work. If we were getting a little bit of a discount on Woodruff, I'd have more interest. But when you look at it from a roster construction standpoint on the 2 pitcher sites, because that's obviously what we're talking about with either of these pitchers, you're not looking to them on FanDuel. But from a roster construction standpoint, if you're getting out of like 2, if you're not going with 2 of the true aces on this slate, it's probably because you're looking to get in expensive bats, and I'm not sure that saving money down to Woodruff really gets that done for you. So I think it's more likely that I end up either spending up above Woodruff or getting down below him. Not to mention there is one pitcher around him that I actually like a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, the way I see it is 2 pretty good offenses, 2 pretty good pitchers. Now, when it comes to a guy like Travis Shaw, I honestly feel like taking him out of the lineup with the way that he's played is probably a downgrade for pitchers. You mentioned that how do you pronounce his name, by the way, this prospect? Hiura?
I have no idea. I said Hiura. I have no idea.
Okay. I really don't either. I thought you had it locked in, so I was going to defer to you on that one.
I said it confidently, though.
Yes, you certainly did. Well, that's why I asked you. I'm like, fella knows his shit. He's got it locked down, man. He's done some research. But either way, at this rate, I don't know if you can really look at somebody like Travis Shaw being out of the lineup and say, oh, man, that's a nice upgrade for Jared Eichhoff, because he will strike out a decent amount. Although we'll call him Hiura. You said Hiura? Are we going to go with Hiura?
That's what I went.
Silent H?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go Keston Hiura, Silent H. If anybody knows in YouTube chat or Slack, feel free to let us know, but make sure you're positive. 27% K rate this year and 147 plate appearances. So at least we know that this guy, while he is talented, because he has 11 home runs already this season. That's crazy. We do know
he's 22.
What's that?
And he's only 22, and this is his first crack at AAA.
He's 190 pounds too. That's a lot of pop for a skinny fella. Like, actually 5'11", 190 is not that small, but 27%.
Stocky, dude.
27% K rate. Like, I think at the major league level he will strike out. What is Steamers has him at 25%, 24.6, which is pretty interesting. Even so, like Eichhoff still has the K numbers there. It concerns me. But as far as a stat goes from Milwaukee, Braun's back in the lineup. You have Yelich batting second, of course, just flat out stud. Lorenzo Cain, 5-hit game yesterday. Moustakas batting cleanup. Aguilar, Yasmani Grandal, Yura, Orlando Arcia, and Brandon Woodruff.
Yeah, I mean, I like getting to some Milwaukee stacks here just because of their price point more than anything. It's a favorable park for power, so that helps. But you get Yelich, Moustakas, and Grandal, all three with tons of power from the left side. And Eichhoff does give up power to lefties. If you go back to the start of 2017, he's only struck out about 18% of lefties, and he's allowed 1.5 home runs per 9. So I like those three. But then you also just get cheap guys with Aguilar at 3,400. He hasn't been good, but he's 3,400. Yura at 3,200. We know that he has a ton of talent, and it's really tough to get that much upside at second base for that cheap. So then Kane's inexpensive as well. It's just the Milwaukee team that I think is more talented than their price tags. So not a spot that I'm like super confident in coming through all that often, but I do think that when they do come through, they have a really high ceiling.
Ryan Stubbs coming through in the clutch. He said, Yura is how they say it on the highlights. You nailed it, bro. You nailed it.
There we go.
There it is. Now, granted, we're getting this info from YouTube chat, but at the same time, he said he pulled it from highlights. And if I can't pronounce a name, I'll either go to Baseball Reference first, where he isn't, and then I'll go to highlights. That's exactly where I went for Margovicius. That one was a fun one. But Yura, so there it is. Appreciate that, Ryan. Good looking out. Any thoughts on Philly bats before we move on? Like I said, I do think Woodruff had been unlucky. I think he's looked a lot better lately. That BABIP was sky high, and now we're seeing it balance out a little bit. And he's also allowed, one run in each of his last 3 starts with 6, 7, and 9 strikeouts. This guy, Adam, he has 54 Ks in 42 1/3 innings. He does have legit strikeout stuff. It's just the Phillies lineup that can really make you work, especially with a healthy Gene Segura.
Yeah, exactly. Like I like Woodruff. I think he's a good pitcher. I'm not really looking to get to the Philadelphia bats. Between the two teams, I certainly prefer the Milwaukee bats at their price tags. So yeah, I mean it's just not a stack that's really popping up for me. If Woodruff were a little bit cheaper, I would get to him. It's just that he's priced a little higher than I would like in this spot.
All right. Miami, New York Mets and Washington, Noah Syndergaard, Jeremy Hellickson. Syndergaard he's looked better lately. Well, I guess really only had that one really, really good start. And then San Diego got to him a little bit. But $9,800 on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, you've got Noah Syndergaard at $9,300. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's your 7th highest priced pitcher. And then on sponsor of the Deeper Dive, Yahoo, he is down there as your 6th highest priced pitcher at $45, which seems pretty palatable there. But it's such a deep pitching slate, Adam. Chris Sale, Charlie Morton, Kershaw, Caleb Smith, Chris Paddock, and more guys that I haven't referenced yet. So while you certainly have a low expected total for the Washington Nationals at 3.7, you also have 6 other teams with a lower total and 8 or 9 teams with a sub-4 total on the day. Where do you stand on a guy like Syndergaard against a Washington squad that has Juan Soto back in the lineup, which obviously makes a pretty big difference?
Yeah, so I mean, in general, I think anyone that's listened to me talk about Syndergaard ever knows that I hate him as a DFS pitcher. But
yeah,
my interest level in him is site dependent today. So and it revolves around Chris Sale, obviously, Charlie Morton, and Caleb Smith, and where they're priced. If you look on DraftKings, Syndergaard's more expensive than Caleb Smith, so I'm not really interested there. If you look on FanDuel, you have Charlie Morton down in the same price range as Syndergaard, so he's not all that appealing there. On Yahoo, though, you do get Syndergaard as the cheapest of the group, so more appealing on FanDuel and Yahoo to me than on DraftKings. But again, it's not the same watered down Washington lineup that we've been getting in recent games. Soto's back, like you said. Rendon's back in the lineup. They also added Gerardo Parra, who isn't good, but also doesn't strike out a ton and can put the ball in play. So that, him hitting in the middle of the order lowers that upside a little bit as well. I think that getting to guys in tournaments potentially, not that they're priorities, but Victor Robles will steal at will against Syndergaard. Eaton can run on Syndergaard. A lot of guys in this lineup have stolen base upside because Syndergaard's so bad at holding runners. It's just not a spot that I'm really getting to because of the slate. I have him behind Morton, Smith, Sale, so just not getting there.
Yeah, I agree. And yes, Jacob deGrom is your Kawhi Leonard of Major League Baseball. Two guys.
Except Kawhi actually tried to win me some money in NBA this playoffs, so I definitely like him more than Syndergaard.
On the other side, Jeremy Hellickson really, really struggled against lefties this season, which shouldn't come as a huge surprise. The New York Mets have only a 4.4 run total here, though, which is kind of interesting. And temperatures in this game at Nationals Park, which I mentioned this today. Nationals Park has actually been pretty hitter friendly, a little more than I thought. When you look at like the last 2 years of data, winds blowing in, nothing really concerning here. 60 degrees, pretty neutral temperatures. Just throwing that out there. Any thoughts here when it comes to the the New York Mets bats against Hellickson, given that you have a team with 1, 2, 3, 4, only 4 lefties in the lineup today? Usually you have quite a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, not getting to a lot of them, but I do think that Robinson Cano is still underpriced at second base. His expected WOBA against right-handed pitching this year is over 400. His expected ISO is over 200. Hellickson's not particularly good, gives up plenty of power to lefties, over a 200 expected ISO since last season. Michael Conforto, Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil, these guys are all reasonable plays against Hellickson and a bad Washington bullpen, but they're priced pretty appropriately, whereas Cano, I think, gives you a lot of power upside. Wilson Ramos is a cheap catcher option as well. So I'm fine with mixing in some Mets bats, but they're a top 10 stack for me, but I wouldn't say they're top 5.
Okay. Yeah, you look at Awesemo's top stacks, it's under the MLB tab on awesemo.com if you wanted to follow along when we're referencing these stats. He's got the New York Mets kind of right in the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Which, yeah, I mean, really not right in the middle, but pretty close. Top value, 4.3%. Ownership, they're coming in around right in the middle again. And then the DK top stack, which is basically, as I interpret it, the probability that they'll be the top stack, is actually 5th highest tonight, Adam, at 6.2. But what's interesting, and this is why I love this tool, like St. Louis is second at 6.3, Kansas City, or 6.6, Kansas City third at 6.3, Oakland and New York at 4th at 6.2. They're all grouped together. Houston is first at 17.9.
Yeah.
And and Houston still has top 4 value as a stack. So that gives you an idea how far ahead they are of pretty much every other team from a stack standpoint tonight, right?
Yeah, I mean, that'll be a fun one to talk about because I think Houston's a big reason why this slate is so interesting to me. So yeah, I mean, that'll be a fun one to talk about when we get there, but they definitely jump off the page on that stack tool.
Yeah, no question. Let's talk about Colorado and Boston. Chris Sale, Kyle Freeland, something I pointed out today on the strategy show. I think it bears repeating. As Chris Sale's 4-seamer goes, so does his success. So do his fantasy points. His raw whiff count on the 4-seamer. I'll keep referencing this until it stops. His raw whiff count insanely has jumped from 0 in his first 2 games to 1 and 1 in his third and fourth games. Look at his fantasy totals. They very much reflect that. Then 5, pretty decent game. Then 6, pretty decent game. 7, good game. His last game, 14 whiffs on the 4-seamer, Adam. Clearly his best start of the season. Again, as his fastball goes, so do his fantasy production, so do his ability to pitch. And I am one, not that we haven't been, but seeing that with Chris Sale, knowing that his slider was already solid, seeing his fastball velocity back up to that 93, 94 range as an average, there's really nothing that you could say against Chris Sale today unless you're worried about ownership.
Yeah. So the way that I view the whole Chris Sale season basically is if you thought or think that he was hurt, then by all means keep not rostering him or whatever. But he's still Chris Sale. He's still, if we assume he's healthy and just isn't throwing his fastball quite as hard as he used to, he's averaging 92 to 93 instead of 94 to 95. He's still an extremely deceptive pitcher with really good stuff who locates really well. So if you don't think he's hurt, I think it's insane to be like knocking Chris Sale projections because he's not throwing quite as hard. Especially because he still, despite that terrible start to the season that you mentioned, he still ranks 10th out of all starting pitchers in called strike plus swinging strike percentage who have thrown at least 500 pitches this year. So he's still been really good, even though he basically gave the entire field like half the season of a head start. The swings and misses, like you said, have been there on the fastball. And this Colorado lineup, you get them outside of Coors Field. They have, Trevor Story, Nolan Arenado are both obviously really dangerous hitters. Charlie Blackmon over the last few years has been well above average against lefties, but also running out a lineup that has basically all of the strikeout upside in it. Story's at 27.9% or 27.2% since 2017. Tapia in 84 plate appearances against lefties is at 31%. Reynolds is at 31.2. Dahl's at 33.3. Chris Iannetta is at about 22%. There's a ton of strikeouts in this lineup. You get Pat Valaika in there who'll strike out as well. I just don't see how to get away from Chris Sale, especially on DraftKings and Yahoo, where there's not a big price difference between him and Charlie Morton against the Marlins. If you want to make an argument for Charlie Morton at sub 10K on FanDuel against Miami instead of Chris Sale at 11.4, then by all means, if it helps you out hitter-wise, do it. But I just don't think there's going to be enough of an ownership gap for me to want to save $300 from Chris Sale to Charlie Morton on DraftKings, for example.
I'm with you, man. And like everything's coming into focus. He's got the second highest, or he's got tied for the highest called strike plus swinging strike rate on the slate. He's got the second highest swinging strike rate on the slate behind only who, Adam?
Caleb Smith.
Caleb Smith, 16.7%. But yeah, I mean, really, everything looks good to me. There's not, his 500 BABIP against lefties, I can assure you, will come down over time. He's only faced 18 of them, but pretty much everything here stands out, makes him a top play. I think we've spoken enough on that. I do want to get your take on Kyle Freeland, though, who I would say is a pretty average pitcher. He's not bad. He has allowed more power than usual, but also facing a Boston team at Fenway with the monster. Right now, the third highest implied total for the night on a 12-gamer is to the Boston Red Sox at 5.3 runs here against Freeland.
So, I respect Freeland as a pitcher. Obviously, getting out of Coors Field is a good thing. I also hate how little Boston I was getting in my initial crunch because it is a pitcher that pitches to contact, going into Fenway and facing all of these dangerous right-handed hitters. So I think it's a really high upside spot for the Red Sox. You also factor in that the Rockies bullpen has the fifth highest xFIP in baseball this season. So I don't feel comfortable with how little Boston I'm getting. And if you do look at that stack tool on awesemo.com, they stand out as one of the most undervalued stacks in terms of projected ownership versus percent chance in the top scoring stack. So I'm kind of hoping that once I, rank my lineups and get my final crunches done, I end up with more Boston than I'm getting to because I do like them in tournaments. It's just that there's 24 offenses and they're not quite making it for me right now. But if you're getting there, then by all means, I think they are a good play because you just get so much low-owned upside from guys like Betts, JD, Bogarts, Michael Chavis. The problem is just that they're expensive. And among expensive stacks, I have them behind Houston and Kansas City.
Right, and Houston's actually not as expensive today because you take Altuve out, and then you place Gurriel in batting fifth. Not that he's not already in the lineup, but I have a point here. And then Aledmys Diaz batting sixth at a cheaper price. And then if you wanted to throw Tyler White in there too, because the bottom of this order, as we know, can do plenty of damage, as we saw yesterday and plenty of times before, there are ways to stack Houston without having to spend an egregious amount of money. Obviously, even though you want to get the top bats in there as well.
Yeah, exactly. All you have to do is look back the last few slates. The bottom of this order has been absolutely essential in terms. There's power top to bottom. The guy hitting eighth actually has the highest ISO on the team against left-handed pitching.
Yeah.
Not that I'm saying like not that I'm saying anything about that, just it's how it is.
No, but
It's small
Tyler,
sample, but
yeah, Tyler White for his career, and it's not the longest career, but Tyler White for his career has absolutely destroyed left-handed pitching. So,
yeah,
yes,
it's just so much power upside throughout the entire team.
no question. I mean, you even see guys like, and I know I know he's not in the lineup today, but Jake Marisnick with his 4th home run yesterday. He can produce as well. It's top to bottom, like you said. We'll get there in a minute. Do you want to touch on anything else from this Fenway game?
I don't think so. Yeah, really like Chris Sale. If you can get to Boston, then go for it.
All right, let's make a smooth transition then to Houston and Detroit. We've got ourselves Wade Miley and Ryan Carpenter. The highest total on the slate, it's not even close, is Houston. 6.3 implied run total. On the other side of this game, Wade Miley, while he's not a great fantasy pitcher, has done a very good job of limiting runs. 209 moneyline favorite in this game. 4.3 total for the Detroit Tigers. If you want to touch on Miley and just how you view this game for Detroit, we can do that, and then we'll make our way to the Houston hitters.
So my main thing with Miley, he's more expensive than I really want to roster here, but I do think that Detroit, and the stack tool actually backs this up, I think Detroit probably comes in as an over-owned stack here, because anyone who's using projections that go back for multiple years, as you should be, is probably over projecting them a little bit, because Wade Miley was, for most of his career, a completely different pitcher than he is right now. He developed this cutter that's made him much, much more effective against right-handed hitters, doesn't really allow power at all. Unless you're really factoring that in, you're probably getting Detroit as some of the top point per dollar plays, and that's reflected in the stack tool, where their projected ownership as a stack is about twice as high as their percent chance of being the highest scoring stack on the slate. So I did cut back my Detroit projections a little bit, because I know that my projections do go back more than half a season. So that's worth pointing out. But I'm not getting to Miley. It's just that I'm not really getting to Detroit as much as the field either.
Right. Yeah. And again, he is still a better real life pitcher than fantasy pitcher, albeit one that has made some adjustments that have, made him, I guess, palatable in some spots. I'm with you here, and this is where I usually stand on Miley. I don't really have an intention of playing him, but I also don't hate him. I will say, though, that you and I did like him quite a bit against Texas, and that turned out all right. So
yeah.
I mean,
he actually struck guys out too.
Yeah, well, but you know what it is? In the right matchups, Miley can actually be serviceable, and he was $6,800. Go ahead.
No, I mean, through Texas.
That was weird. Everything you said was inaudible until you said Texas.
No, he's struck out like 25+% of left-handed hitters this year, so he kind of just tore through all their lefties and then got outs against righties.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about what everyone's been waiting for, the Houston Astros. Now, I had alluded to it, both of us alluded to it not long ago, that Awesemo, we've been referencing this tool a lot lately because it's really cool. And it's been here. We just hadn't talked about it much on the show before. But the top stack percentage and the stack tool, well, right now, Houston is at a ridiculous 17.9% top stack percentage, 17.9%, Adam. Obviously, their ownership is also going to be up there, still sub 10%, but it's high. And then top value for a team that's this expensive is still the 4th highest on the slate. That is on DraftKings. On FanDuel, really pretty much the same thing, except the same thing in terms of the top stack probability, but their ownership looks like it's going to be quite a bit higher, and their value isn't as good. I guess I'll finish it out here since this is the most important team on the slate as far as ownership goes. 18.3 top stack probability on FanDuel, ownership at 17.5, top value at 11.7. So according to this stack tool, you're going to have higher ownership, but your best value for a Houston stack, or the best value on the Houston stack is on FanDuel, but the best ownership would be coming from DraftKings.
Right. And So and their projected ownership on DraftKings with our most recent update has almost doubled. So I
Oh,
was
has it?
really interested to see what would. Yeah, it was when I did my initial crunches, they were like 5%.
Oh, okay.
It
So the
was
9.4
yeah.
is current. Just want to make sure it didn't double from 9.4. Okay. Yeah.
No, 9.4 is current. But
Yeah.
so I got a lot of Houston because, as I think most people do in tournaments, I weight my hitter scores a little bit higher than my pitcher scores, and so it makes sure I get that get to the good offenses. But scrolling through, and this is why I think that you mentioned the ownership on FanDuel being higher. We know that pricing there is softer, but on DraftKings where pricing's tighter, scrolling through my lineups, my Houston stacks, if I have Chris Sale, who obviously a lot of people are going to want in their lineups, if I have Chris Sale, it's with like Tyler Beede or a ton of Brett Anderson, which I don't like, but it's there, or Joe Musgrove. Like it's with these pitchers that are really scary and just really cheap, or I don't have Chris Sale. So you do have to make concessions to get to Houston, especially if you want, Bregman, Springer, Correa in your lineup. Is one thing if you're going like Tyler White and Diaz and Josh Reddick, but that's not really my goal in too many Houston stacks. I want the good players in there. So you really do have to make a choice. And we know that that people don't like going to hitters that are low in the order, and they don't like sacrificing a pitcher. So Houston's ownership really can only get so high for those two reasons. But when you have a team in this good of a spot, like Brian Carpenter has done nothing to suggest that he's good. He's thrown a little bit less than 400 pitches to right-handed hitters in the major leagues, but over a 400 expected WOBA and a 200 expected ISO. Detroit's bullpen has the sixth highest xFIP in baseball. There's just nothing to dislike about Houston here. If they have a bad game, it's probably just that they hit a bunch of balls to the base of the wall that got caught, or they hit line drives at people. It's baseball; they can fail. But this is one of the highest percent chances of a team being the highest stack on a slate this big that I can remember seeing. Like I'd be surprised if we see one for a while where a team is pushing 20% on a 12-game slate. So I really want to get there in tournaments, especially because I think the ownership will be kept in check. You can also, in addition to going to the bottom of the order, you have Michael Brantley batting third at 5,400.
Yep.
Just by putting him in lineups, that's another way that you're contrarian while playing Houston, because people aren't going to play a lefty for 5,400 against a lefty, even though it's a good lefty in Brantley. So it's a stack that has a ton of upside. It's contrarian. It's easy to be contrarian within the stack. The only downside is that you have to get really creative at pitcher.
And excuse me, there also isn't a team above 7% in top stack probability, right, other than Houston.
Like they're more than twice as likely to be the highest scoring stack on the slate according to the stack tool than any of the other 23 teams.
Yeah, almost 3 times. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like it is in stark contrast to pretty much every other team. Did you want to touch on any other Detroit bats before we move on? If there's any one-offs you're interested in, or do you want to talk Tampa, Miami?
I mean, Castellanos is the best hitter in the lineup, obviously. Outfield, though, does have some underpriced guys that I would rather get to than Castellanos. So it's mostly just Houston bats for me in this game.
That sounds good to me. Miami, Tampa Bay, Charlie Morton, Caleb Smith, 2 strong pitchers. One of them obviously has the benefit of facing Miami, a team that, I mean, it's pretty incredible. This Marlins team has it is so bad. Not only do they have I have a sheet, it's like color coded, and there's green and there's red, and there's just so much green on Miami. I obviously had the worst teams look better. It's green everywhere, Adam, and that's because they're bad literally everywhere. There's not a single aspect of this team that's good. They have a 69 WRC plus against right-handed pitchers. They have an ISO of .088, a weighted on base average of 269. Now, all 3 of them rank dead last in the league, some of them by a wide margin. But what makes it even more interesting is their K rate against righties is the 6th highest in the entire league as well. So they also, if you look at their speed rating, no surprise, they're dead last. They're literally bad everywhere, even on the base path. So I want to really break this down because Caleb Smith is the better pitcher. Caleb Smith has higher upside. Caleb Smith leads this slate in swinging strike rate and called plus swinging strikes, tied with Sale. But then on the other side, the matchup is just so damn good that decisions need to be made, and that's what you're here for. So let's talk about it.
Right. So you look at the pricing on DraftKings. Charlie Morton's $300 less than Chris Sale. On Yahoo, they are the same price, I believe. And on FanDuel, he is like $1,700 less expensive. So I like him on FanDuel quite a bit. Especially, it helps that on FanDuel you don't lose points for walks, which is where Charlie Morton's most likely to get in trouble. He has an 11+% walk percentage this year. But on DraftKings and Yahoo, unless you're getting a pretty big ownership discount, I just can't go to Morton over Sale. Like, Sale is the better pitcher. I know the matchup's really good for Morton, but it's not like there aren't strikeouts in the Colorado lineup. And Sale's just a much better pitcher than Morton is. Not to mention, when you look on DraftKings, he's $1,000 more than Caleb Smith, who has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate. So I have a really hard time justifying Morton on any site that isn't FanDuel, even though it is a really good matchup. It's not like I'm looking to get the Miami bats. There was a conversation on Twitter that lasted most of the afternoon about the Marlins, in particular, Starlin Castro, who's batting cleanup at $2,400 on DraftKings. He is projected as my top point per dollar second baseman. That being said, I'm getting almost none of him because he has no upside. Like, he's a below average hitter against right-handed pitching with virtually no power in a park that sucks for hitting against a really good pitcher in Morton. So it's just an example of, point per dollar median projections for hitters not being all that important, at least in my process. So not getting to Miami here. It's not like I want to leverage against Morton. I don't think he has enough ownership on DraftKings or Yahoo for that to be viable with the team this bad. But just not really rostering Morton either outside of FanDuel, where he is much less expensive than Sale.
Yeah, look, and I think you're right. But I just the biggest thing here is just, it's kind of simple. The Marlins have been so remarkably bad that it really feels like every pitcher recently that has faced them has had positive or above average results. And not really hyperbole. Like, all right, Jacob deGrom, 7 innings, 1 earned, 8 strikeouts, and the win. You look at even guys like John Lester and Kyle Hendricks going 8. It feels like any pitcher you put up against them right now is going to have above average to well above average results. So, I totally agree with you on Sale. And Colorado outside, of course, the Rockies have really struggled, not just this year, but for many years. It's just a conversation always worth having when you have a guy like Morton, who's probably a bit overpriced, but is a good pitcher and has the best matchup in all of Major League Baseball. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And basically, it just comes down to me, what sites have priced him for this matchup and what sites haven't. And shockingly, FanDuel is behind on their pricing. You're talking about a pitcher with just since last year with a 29.2% strikeout percentage, just shy of a 10% walk percentage, and a 3.44 xFIP. Normally, that's not a $10,500 pitcher, especially when Chris Sale is $10,800. So clearly, you have him priced up there because of this matchup. So there's just naturally less excess value because the site has already taken into account that he's facing such a bad Miami team. Whereas FanDuel, it clearly has not taken that into account. So there is a lot of excess value on Charlie Morton there specifically.
No question. Yeah, and Charlie Morton's numbers aren't bad. 12% swinging strike rate. Called plus swinging is super high. His numbers are very good. It's just you have to make that decision, and I think this is a spot where you go with the talent. Would you have a different opinion if it was like Sale versus the Angels?
Yes.
Okay, I would too. And I
don't know. It would be a different opinion. I don't know that it would be enough for me to have. It would get really close for me there. That's like Houston or the Angels would be the two teams.
That's why I'm at right. Okay. Right. Yeah, and I think that levels the playing field a little bit. The reason I ask you that is just to kind of drive home the point that a matchup with Colorado also is not bad for an opposing pitcher outside of Coors.
Yeah. Especially this version of Colorado where they're running a bunch of high strikeout lefties out there.
Exactly. Adam, Caleb Smith, very good pitcher, very good numbers, misses a ton of bats, throws 3 pitches, all of them are nasty, all of them get a lot of swinging strikes. What are your thoughts on him here against Tampa Bay. He's $9,500 on DraftKings. On Yahoo, he's $49. And on FanDuel, he's $10,700. So a lot of discrepancy here between sites. Obviously, way more expensive on FanDuel than anywhere else.
Right, so it's really tough to get to him on FanDuel, where you have Morton for 9,800. But on DraftKings and Yahoo, I like him quite a bit. You get a little bit of a discount on Yahoo at $49. On DraftKings, he's $1,000 less than Morton. He's $1,300 less than Sale. He's, I think, $700 less than Clayton Kershaw. He's even cheaper than Syndergaard. And you are talking about the pitcher with the highest strikeout percentage on the slate, the lowest xFIP on the slate, facing a Tampa Bay team that most of their good hitters are left-handed, and they have struck out their active roster has struck out about 27% of the time, 27.9% of the time against left-handed pitching this season in a favorable pitcher's park. You mentioned the swinging strike percentages, and not only does he have the slate there as well, but 3 different pitches that have monster swinging strike percentages. Against righties, north of 17% on his fastball, over 20% on his changeup, gets a lot of swings and misses on his slider as well. And then against lefties, he's throwing his slider about 55% of the time with just shy of a 22% swinging strike percentage. So the stuff's really good. The walk rate this year has gone down for the 3rd season in a row. It's sitting at 7.5%, which is really strong. He just has tons and tons of upside. And if I can't quite get to Sale, I'm fine taking him on. Like, he isn't as, I don't even want to use the word safe because it's baseball and nothing's safe, but he obviously doesn't have the Chris Sale track record, but he has tons of upside. And there's no reason that I can find to think that he's not legit in terms of his ability to get swings and misses and to get strikeouts. So I like Caleb Smith quite a bit. He helps you, like with those Astro stacks. A lot of them I was getting to him over Sale because the savings helped. And I don't think that lowers your upside. It just lowers your probability of getting there by a little bit.
For sure. Look, saying a pitcher's safe in baseball, it's different than saying like a player is safe in basketball, where, generally speaking, they're going to give you between this and this, like 90% of the time. With baseball, you could have, like to me, I consider Caleb Smith consistent. That doesn't mean that if he has one blow-up outing, he's not consistent anymore. It's an outlier. But you're also talking about a guy that his strikeout totals this year per game, 8, 7, 6, that was against Philly. So 8, 7, 6, 8, 8, 8, 11. And he's faced some low-K teams in the process, and some difficult teams throughout all of this. I mean, he's just done enough to look at him at 9,500 and say, Caleb Smith is worth more than that. And the thing that I found actually more appealing and impressive, I think I mentioned it to Josh this morning, than the strikeouts, Adam, listen to his innings. Outside of the 5-inning game against the Mets, it was his first start of the season where he still had 20 fantasy points. 6, 6, 6, 6, 7, 6 2/3. So he's going 6+ innings every single night. That's got to count for something.
Yeah, I have him projected for the 2nd most raw points at pitcher on the slate behind Sale. And on DraftKings and Yahoo, you're talking about, the 5th most expensive pitcher.
Yeah.
Or somewhere.
Exactly. Do you want to talk about any hitters here?
No.
All right.
Oh, I guess you kind of have to mention Travis d'Arnaud. $2,900 hitting 5th for Tampa Bay. He, limited at bats, but since 2017, an 18.9% strikeout percentage against lefties and an ISO approaching 200. It's catcher. He's cheap. Caleb Smith's really good, but it's catcher and he's cheap.
All right. All right. Let's do St. Louis, Atlanta. We've got Jack Flaherty, Mike Foltynewicz on the mound tonight. One of them has been awful since being activated, and there's some talk about Atlanta having rushed him back too soon. It's been a pretty brutal go. He's actually lost. He's down 2 ticks on his fastball. I don't know, Adam, how much of that, and I think you probably have the same mindset. I don't know how much of that is he's just working his way back, and a lot of times guys don't have their best stuff or the velocity when you're such a hard thrower like Folty early in the season. But it is something that's worth discussing. And he's also allowed 5 home runs in his first 16 2/3 innings pitched. So it's certainly been a tough go for him. On the other side, Jack Flaherty's been fine this season, but he hasn't been that ace. He's had a couple high K games. His defense has let him down in the field in a couple of spots, but Flaherty has also labored at times, and now he faces an Atlanta team that, as we know, makes a whole lot of contact and makes life difficult for opposing righties.
Yeah, I think both of these teams are pretty interesting in tournaments because Folty has really struggled, like you said. Normally, he's normally good against both sides of the plate, but especially against righties, he's always been pretty good. Hard thrower, good stuff. Velocity down a bit, like you said, but really just struggling against everyone. But if you take that out, it's still a Cardinals team that has a ton of good hitters, and they're very, very affordable. If you look at their pricing, Matt Carpenter is still cheap because he's been terrible to start the year, but it's still Matt Carpenter. It's one thing if we weren't getting him at a discount, but we are. Paul Goldschmidt is the best hitter on the team, and he's 4,300 on DraftKings. Like, there's a ton of upside at that price. You have to pay up for Paul DeJong, but outside of that, Ozuna's affordable, Martinez, Molina, these are all pretty inexpensive guys, and it lets you get to a really high upside stack against a pitcher who has been struggling. That's not to say that we know it's going to continue going forward, but there's at least reason to think that it could be a favorable spot for the Cardinals. And you're just getting a lot of upside built into your lineup because it lets you get to pitchers that you want as well. So they're coming out as a top 5 stack for me right now in my initial crunches. And then Atlanta, I'm not getting as much as I am the Cardinals, but you can kind of make the same arguments for them from the talent per dollar standpoint, where nobody in this lineup on DraftKings is more than $4,500, and those two players are Acuna and Freeman, who are both incredibly good. You get a lot of power from them. You get Josh Donaldson. You have Dansby Swanson, who is finally putting everything together at the plate. It seems like hitting for some power. He's affordably priced at shortstop. You just get a lot of upside from both of these teams that are full of good hitters.
All right, I agree. Have you outside of everything I mentioned, have you identified anything with Folty that stood out to you?
No, I'm not real confident that in what you're going to get from him. Like, I think he turns things around eventually, unless he goes back on the injured list. But when that happens, I have no idea.
All right. Yeah, it's a good point. It's worth keeping an eye out for. We've got
the way that I see it. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The way that I see it basically is, if Folty were the Folty from last year and we had the Cardinals at these prices in large field tournaments, I would still have interest in the Cardinals just because of how good they are and how inexpensive they are for most of their guys. The fact that there's at least some chance that Folty is not close to what he was last year just makes it even more appealing.
There was also a lot of speculation that Folty wouldn't be the same as last year. Like,
right.
that was kind of an outlier season. And as we know, he had trouble with power to lefties years leading up to last year, right? Like, we were targeting against him last year, assuming that he still struggled against lefties.
Right.
So he's only faced 38 lefties this year, but he has a 265 ISO, 2 home runs per 9, and a 1.22 WHIP. That's with a 214 BABIP. So you can do the math there. It's been a rough start. Obviously, you need some more batters faced before we can really glean anything from that. But only 13% strikeouts this year, and his swinging strikes are down as well. So concerning there. I definitely agree with you on St. Louis. And you know what? Even if you're not looking at a stack, somebody like Carpenter at a cheap price leading off is a strong play regardless. All right, Minnesota, L.A., Kyle Gibson, Bedrosian starting or getting the start here, and then Felix Pena as your probable long reliever. Dude, he's been really good. I brought this up to Josh today. I was asking him. I was trying to see if he could guess the highest swinging strike rates on this slate, behind Caleb Smith. So you might be able to, because I know you look at these numbers. Caleb Smith and then Chris Sale. Do you know who is at 13.2 and then well, you know one of them is going to be Pena. So I'll just tell you. Pena's at 13%, 31% called plus swinging. Kyle Gibson's at 13.2% with a 30.6% called plus swinging strike rate. So Pena's missing a ton of bats this year, Adam. It's just a matter of, can he throw 6-7 innings if his pitch count's up? Because last game was 80. He only threw 86 pitches. And is this a Minnesota team that you want to pick on anyway? But he's been very good.
Right. Both of these pitchers are guys that I like to roster in certain spots, and they are both in spots that do not qualify for that. The
Exactly.
Angels, yeah, the Angels just a team that do not strike out. You have Ohtani back in there, which gives you a really dangerous hitter. In addition to a lineup that doesn't strike out, and then for Pena, he's still getting hit hard by lefties. His expected ISO to lefties is over 200 this year. Trying to get it pulled up now, but so 308 expected ISO to lefties this year, 395 expected WOBA. He's getting swinging strikes against them, but still getting hit hard. And you just have this Minnesota team that has good lefties. Four of the top six hitters, Kepler, Polanco, Rosario, and Gonzalez, all can do damage against him from the left side. Mitch Garver's been a good hitter this year. CJ Cron's a good enough hitter. 7, you have Astudillo, who we know is not going to strike out. So it's just a really, really tough spot for Pena to have success. I'd rather get to Minnesota because you do have reasonable price tags with Kepler, 3,800, Polanco and Rosario a bit cheaper than they have been. Marwin Gonzalez still essentially free. So getting to Minnesota is like my 5th or 6th stack in my initial crunches. And then on the other side, I'm not getting full Angel stacks, but I am getting a good amount of Mike Trout and especially Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani is just a phenomenal hitter, and he pretty much always goes overlooked, it seems like, unless the Angels as a stack are in a great spot, because I just don't think people realize how good he is. But north of a 300 ISO and a 400 WOBA against right-handed pitching since debuting with the Angels last year. Gibson is a good pitcher, but when he does struggle, it normally is with left-handed power, and you're just getting a huge discount on Ohtani from an upside standpoint. So getting to a lot of him as a one-off or in mini stacks, with like Trout and someone else.
Same, absolutely. Look, if you and I were both targeting him last night against Berrios, I don't think we're going to get away from that today when he's the same exact price against Gibson, right? 4,100 on DraftKings. He is the 27th highest priced outfielder on Yahoo, which, by the way, I just dropped a link into the YouTube chat. If you've yet to head over to Yahoo, definitely check it out. Click that link. And when you sign up, use the code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points, which basically are, it's currency. You can use them to play and win real money on the site. If you've been watching the show and you haven't signed up by now, you know that their management fees are lower than every other site. Some games, they don't have them at all. And you're not going up against guys that are, loading CSVs into it and playing 150 lineups, 10 entry max on even their biggest guaranteed contest, like the 10K guaranteed, 2K to first tonight. You have a good as chance as anyone is taking first place. So check it out, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, sponsor of the Deeper Dive, and use that code AWESEMO, get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points when you do. All right, Adam. And by the way, to your point against Pena, you're right. Even outside of the expected ISO, he's got a 259 actual ISO against lefties, 2.35 home runs per 9. So while he has been good and is still striking lefties out at 28%, he has definitely been fallible as well.
Yeah, and it's not like that's a new problem. A 193 ISO since the start of last season to lefties.
For sure. All right, Texas and Kansas City, Danny Duffy, Shelby Miller going up against KC. It's a shame. I really like Kansas City. They're just super expensive. There's you can run on Shelby Miller. I'm not worried about that. Kind of Felifa behind the plate. Whatever. Could be better, but these guys are going to run anyway. You got Nicky Lopez batting second here from the left side of the plate. Mondesi, Merrifield, Gordon, Dozier, Soler, Rhino Hearn batting 7th. Kind of letting me down this year. But nevertheless, this is a very good spot against Miller. It's just, can you prioritize a team like Kansas City, and how much will you have today?
Yeah, that's the thing, and it's also tough to stack them because, on Yahoo and FanDuel, Nicky Lopez isn't in the player pool. On DraftKings, he is. He's a $3,300 shortstop batting second, which is really appealing for a guy with a ton of speed that has good on-base skills, and it's a good spot against Miller. The problem is that Adalberto Mondesi is one of the top plays on the slate for me, and he plays the same position as Nicky Lopez. And so it makes it really tough. Like if you're stacking Kansas City, you want the speedy guy hitting second for cheap, but you also want Mondesi, and you can't have both. So it makes full stacking a little bit less appealing. in addition to the fact that they are expensive. That being said, I do like getting them as like mini stacks or one-offs. If you can get them as full stacks too, that's good. But I think they're just a little bit more appealing as one-offs and mini stacks. You have Whit Merrifield, who has a ton of speed and can do damage against Miller. Mondesi, like I said, I absolutely love.
Love Mondesi.
He's right. Yeah, right now he's my highest owned shortstop, even ahead of Correa in my initial crunch. Hunter Dozier's improved this year. Alex Gordon finally figured out how to hit after like 20 years. But it's a good Kansas City team. It's just that they are, or it's good Kansas City hitters at the top, but it's just that they're priced up, and Nicky Lopez being in there kind of just screws up the entire stack, which knocks them down a little bit for me. Like behind the Astros for sure amongst the expensive stacks on the slate.
I saw you mention it earlier today that they both are exclusively shortstop eligible. I mean,
hopefully DraftKings moves him to second base really quickly.
Yeah, I hope so, man. That sucks.
Like good job by them to actually have him in the player pool.
Right. And they do a very good job of that.
Yeah. And he is a shortstop, so like you can't even really fault them there. It's just that he's not a shortstop for Kansas City.
I hear you. Really quickly though, do you project him to be good?
He has shown good on base skills. He walks a lot, doesn't strike out a lot.
422 WOBA.
Yeah, not a ton of power, but good on base skills and fast.
Yeah, that's exactly what they needed. Another speed guy.
Right. Except this one can actually get on base.
Right. Yeah, exactly. He's not Terrence Gore.
Or Billy
Hamilton. Or Billy Hamilton. Outside of Kansas City, you have Danny Duffy on the bump. What are your thoughts here against Texas and Texas bats? Cover it all in one shot because we still got 4 games here.
Yeah, so I'm getting to Duffy on 2 pitcher sites just because Texas does have a lot of strikeouts in their lineup, and most of their scary hitters are left-handed. Obviously Andrews is good, Pence has reemerged, but Chu, Gallo, Mazzara, Odor, all left-handed. Since 2017, Duffy's held lefties to a 252 WOBA, 22.8% strikeout percentage. Done a really good job there. 2 starts ago, he started throwing his slider a lot, and it got me really excited. Last start against Houston, he went back to throwing his sinker at the expense of his slider. He had success, but that's something that I hope he doesn't do going forward. This is a spot where I'm rostering him just because of the matchup and because there's a chance that he's improving. But I will be interested just to see what he throws in this game in order to evaluate him, better as a pitcher.
All right. Arizona, Pittsburgh, Luke Weaver, Joe Musgrove. Josh and I definitely were a little bit surprised today to see the immense ownership coming in on somebody like Luke Weaver. We've got our updates in on the ownership here, which, by the way, if you wanted to check it out, some days we actually throw it out there for free, yes, like yesterday. But if you wanted to get a month of premium subscription for half off, all you got to do is use the promo code Deeper Dive, all one word, Deeper Dive, to get those, to get the projections. Alex Baker, Awesomo's projections, to get the rankings, to get the Awesemo stack tool that Adam and I have referenced, all of our articles that we labor over each and every day, and of course, content projections, ownership projections, and so much more from every other sport that has daily fantasy contests. That's promo code Deeper Dive, one word. We hope to see you over there, and say what's up in our premium Slack chat when you decide to sign up. Fantasy Cruncher add-on. How could I forget with Fantasy Cruncher Pro? Okay, Adam. So Luke Weaver he's come down a bit, but he's at 20% on DraftKings right now. What do you make of that?
I think he's improved this year. I've never been high on him in the past, but his secondary pitches have improved. He's throwing his changeup more to lefties, cutter more to righties, getting more swinging strikes on them. His release point has changed from last year, which could have something to do with it as well. He's just still, like I talked about with Woodruff, it's tough for me to get to that price range because I'd rather find a little bit more money for Caleb Smith, or I'd rather just completely punt the SP2 position and get bats in my lineup. So I do like Weaver. It's just that I'm not getting to that price point. I'm not really getting to anything in that like 8,500 to 9,500 range. So he's kind of priced out for me, at least in my current crunch. I do like him more than the guys than Woodruff or Eichhoff in that range. So, if you can get to him, then go for it. I think it's a fine spot. I think he has improved. It's just from a roster construction standpoint, he's been left out.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Musgrove's been struggling lately, man. Musgrove's been, 2 really bad starts. I know you were just baffled by the 5 walks for a control pitcher. Like that's what he is usually good at. 7 walks to 4 strikeouts over his last 2 games, Adam. He hasn't thrown 80 pitches in either because it's been so bad that they just pulled him out. He's going up against Arizona in Chase Field.
Yep, getting to a bunch of him on DraftKings, not on Yahoo because his price tag isn't as appealing, and obviously FanDuel you need one pitcher, but 6,500 on DraftKings. I don't think there's anything wrong with him. His velocity and everything's looked fine. His movement this year hasn't been as good as last season, but it's not like it's a huge drop off or anything. Right now, I'm willing to just chalk up bad starts against Oakland and St. Louis to he had bad starts against Oakland and St. Louis. It's not like it's an appealing matchup here against the Diamondbacks either, but you do have 6 righties in the lineup. And most importantly, you're getting a pitcher in Musgrove who does have some sort of a ceiling, and he lets you get really good bats into your lineup. So it's purely a price play. It doesn't come with a lot of confidence, but I don't think that he's broken or anything like that. And I think that the price tag on DraftKings in particular clearly reflects his 2 most recent starts more than his overall track record.
All right. Any bats here?
I mean, if Arizona has a really high ceiling, but they're not a priority for me.
All right, going to speed this up a bit. Trent Thornton and Tyler Beede coming in for Nick Vincent. You mentioned Beede a little bit here. We had a question about Thornton, so tackle both of these guys.
Yeah, getting to both pitchers in tournaments, just because the park is good. Thornton's big issue has been left-handed power. There's basically none of that in the Giants lineup outside of Belt and Vogt, and this park obviously downplays that. So Thornton, I think, is a perfectly fine play as an SP2. Tyler Beede is expected to come in. It's not a lock with Derek Holland in the bullpen now too, but I'm assuming it's Beede. They had said he was going to start today. It's his day to pitch. So I think he should come in. He's another one where I'm fine getting there as an SP2. It's a favorable matchup against Toronto. One thing to keep in mind is that unless it updates between now and lock, he's not in the DraftKings player pool on Fantasy Cruncher. So the way I've gotten around that is I'm projecting Jeremy Hellickson the same way I project Beede, and then I'm just global swapping Hellickson to Beede.
All right, makes sense. What about batters in this game?
No.
Yeah, easy decision. How much Thornton?
Really cheap,
how much Thornton do you think you have?
Probably somewhere like 10 to 15%, and probably similar for Beede.
All right, let's keep it going then because we don't need to talk hitters. San Diego and the Dodgers. Kershaw. Chris Paddack. Paddock's been excellent. He's been just phenomenal, and I've loved what I've seen from this guy. You look at some of the numbers that we discuss often that we find important, that are important, not that we find important, but 24% strikeouts against lefties, 38% against righties, 31.6% called plus swinging, 13% swinging strike rate. Adam, he's been very, very, very good.
Yeah, he's really, really good. So are the Dodgers.
Sure.
I'm not really getting to either side. The Dodgers have a really scary lineup. Paddack has one of the best changeups in baseball, so he should be able to mitigate left-handed power. It's just that I don't, with all the pitching on this slate, I'm not taking a pitcher against the Dodgers all that much. And with all the good offensive spots, I'm not really getting to the Dodgers, even though they are one of the best offenses in baseball and a really, really high upside team. If I had to go to one of the two, it would be the Dodgers, but I'm not getting to much of either.
Okay. Yeah, Kershaw definitely projected to have some considerable ownership, 20% here, third highest on the slate behind Sale and Smith. I don't know, man. I prefer Morton over Kershaw. Obviously we prefer Sale. That's obvious, but if it was Morton or Kershaw for you, say on DraftKings, where would you go here? By the way, on FanDuel, on Yahoo, Kershaw is 52, Morton is 53. So that's why I'm mentioning DraftKings specifically. If you had to pick between Kershaw and Morton.
Yeah, I prefer Morton to Kershaw by a very little bit, but by a little bit just because I think the Miami matchup's more favorable than the San Diego matchup. And also because I think that on DraftKings, Machado is a really good value option with third base shortstop eligibility, only $3,700. He's priced appropriately on the other sites, but on DraftKings, getting to him opens up a lot in your lineup. And obviously, I don't really want to get to him if I have Kershaw.
Where are you at on hitters, if any?
Manny Machado and Franmil Reyes. That's about it.
Okay. I think that makes enough sense to
me. Mostly just Machado because outfield's stacked.
And then we'll close it out with Oakland and Seattle. Mike Leake and Brett Anderson. Do you like pitching here? And do you like Seattle bats against Mike Leake?
I don't like pitching. I am getting a pretty good amount of $5,600 Brett Anderson on DraftKings, and that is purely because of the bats it gets me and hoping that he just gets 6 innings of ground balls hit at people. It has nothing to do with Brett Anderson. It's just a price play. I do like the Oakland bats. They're really cheap. They have a ton of power. Leake has struggled this year. He's always been someone with a really small margin of error, but he's not been good at limiting power so far this season. And you just get discounted prices on Chris Davis, Olsen, Piscotty. Profar is cheap. This whole team is really cheap. So they're coming in as a top 5 stack just because of the power upside and the amount of upside that it lets me get into my lineups. On the other side, Seattle's a lot more expensive. So I'm not getting to as much of them because I just can't prioritize them over other teams I'm paying up for, like Kansas City or Houston.
Okay. Anything? Do you want to touch on anything else here? I don't want to just brush over it, but we are short on time. Anything else from this game between Leake and Anderson?
No, basically just getting to Anderson as a price play and Oakland power.
All right, let's close it out with our top stacks. Adam, go ahead.
Houston, Oakland, St. Louis, Minnesota, Kansas City.
Same exact stack. So, all right, good stuff. I think we could see something pop off in that Milwaukee Philly game. There's quite a bit of upside in both teams, but two decent pitchers as well.
Milwaukee was my 6th.
Yeah, there you go. That'll do it for us. Hey, if you enjoy the show, you want to see more of it, and you want to help support us over at awesomemode.com, hit us with a thumbs up, like that video. It helps us a lot, and we greatly appreciate it. As you know, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you always know when new content's dropping next. Until next time, check out our sponsor, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. Link is in the chat. And hang around next for Live Before Lock. They're taking you up till 7:05 Eastern Time for this 12-game slate. Good luck tonight, everyone. We'll see you back here tomorrow.